the truth is there's some bad apples out there, and spotting them is not going to come from looking at documents. You really have to size up whether that person who's getting a lot of cash from you how they're going to behave in the future, because we're counting on them.
Other successful acquisitive companies use teams of internal people, outside bankers, consultants, and lawyers to do diligence, often over many months, to assess deals. Speed may be a competitive advantage. You've done some amazing deals. But does your diligence process also put us at greater risk? And if you're ever gone, how would you recommend Berkshire change how we approach deal making?
Which we would have paid them by the hour for. It's interesting. We've made plenty of mistakes in acquisitions, plenty, and we made mistakes in not making acquisition. But the mistakes are always about making an improper assessment of the economic conditions in the future of the industry or the company. They're not a bad lease. They're not a specific labor contract. They're not a questionable patent. They're not the things that are on the checklist, for every acquisition by every major corporation in America. Those are not the things that count. What counts is whether you're wrong about whether you really got a fix on the basic economics and how the industry is likely to develop, or whether Amazon's likely to kill them, in a few years, or that sort of thing. And we have not found a due diligence list that gets at what we think are the real risks when we buy a business. And like I said, we certainly made at least a half a dozen mistakes, and probably a lot more if you get into mistakes of omission. But none of those would have been cured by a lot more due diligence. They might have been cured by us being a little smarter. It just isn't the things that are on the checklist that really count. Assessing whether a manager who I'm going to hand $1 billion to for his business, and he is going to hand me a stock certificate, assessing whether he's going to behave differently in the future in running that business than he has in the past when he owned it, that's incredibly important. But there's no checklist in the world that's going to answer that. So if we thought there were items of due diligence, and incidentally there are a few that get covered. I mean, you want to make sure that they don't have twice as many shares out as you're buying or something of the sort. But if we thought there were things that we were missing that were of importance in assessing the future economic prospects of the business, we would by all means drill down on those. But the question of, when we bought Seas, they probably had 150 leases. When we buy Precision Castparts, they have 170 plants. There's going to be pollution problems at some place, and that is not what determines whether a $32 billion acquisition is going to look good 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And we try to focus on those things. And I do think it probably facilitates things with at least certain people that our method of operation does cut down. You get into squabbles on small things. I've seen deals fall apart because people start arguing about some unimportant point, and their egos get involved, and they draw lines in the sand and all of that. I think we gain a lot. When we start to make a deal, it usually gets done. Charlie?
Well, if you stop to think about it, business quality usually counts on something more than whether you crossed a T in some old lease or something. And the human quality of the management who are going to stay are very important. And how are you going to check that as by due diligence, And I don't know anybody who's had a generally better record than Berkshire in judging business quality and the human quality of the people who are going to lead the business after it's acquired. And I don't think it would have improved at all by using some different method. So I think the answer is that, for us at least, we're doing it the way we should.
Negotiations that drag out have a tendency, they're more likely to blow up for some reason. I mean, people, they can get obstinate about very small points, and it's silly to be obstinate, but people get silly sometimes. So I like to keep things moving. I like to show a certain amount of trust in the other person, because usually trust comes back to you. But the truth is, there's some bad apples out there, and spotting them is not going to come from looking at documents. You really have to size up whether that person who's getting a lot of cash from you how they're going to behave in the future, because we're counting on them, and that assessment is as important as anything involved. We know all the figures and everything going in, and we know what we'll pay, and so we don't want things to get gummed up in negotiations. And I'm perfectly willing to lose small points here and then on a deal if I have the deal on the right terms. I don't believe in making and Tom Murphy taught me this. I mean, you just don't try and win every point. It's a terrible mistake. You make a decent deal, and if you find something that bends a little different some way, that's okay. If you think it's bad faith and gives an indication of the character of the person you're dealing with, then you got another problem, and you're lucky if you find that out early.